Okay, so good evening, everyone. Bonsoir à tous et à toutes, and welcome to tonight's presentation of OTF Connects, titled Tripping Over Math in Kindergarten, with Jennifer Evans and Erin Clisby. We have a fairly large group tonight, many people joining at the last minute, and as I indicated, many of you are joining from the southern part of Ontario, so it's quite a busy group. Quite a few of you are new to OTF Connects, and I must say that Jennifer and Erin are also new to OTF Connects. It's their very first session. They've prepared a wonderful presentation for you tonight, and it should all go very smoothly. We certainly look forward to addressing your questions and your comments in the chat box throughout this session. Je voudrais profiter de l'occasion pour souhaiter la bienvenue à nos collègues franco-ontariens. Cette session est en anglais, mais si vous désirez obtenir des informations en français, surtout n'hésitez pas à nous contacter par la suite. Et en fin de présentation, je vous parlerai également de notre première session en français qui aura lieu lundi soir. We are definitely thrilled to have each and every one of you with us tonight, and it's also our absolute pleasure to welcome Jennifer Evans and Erin Clisby. Jennifer has been a teacher with the Waterloo District School Board for 12 years, most of which has been spent in kindergarten, including the last 3 years in a full-day kindergarten. She enjoys bringing her interest in technology and mindfulness into the classroom and loves watching her students grow as mathematicians. Erin Clisby has been an early childhood educator with the Waterloo District School Board as well for the last 5 years. She enjoys bringing her interest in active learning and STEAM learning into the classroom and loves watching her students use loose parts to show their math learning. I'm sure that you all know the meaning of the STEAM acronym, but actually I had to look it up. I didn't remember what it was, but I'm putting a little link for you in the chat box if you want to check that later tonight or tomorrow. So at this point, I will pass the microphone to Jennifer and Erin to let them keep introducing themselves as well as tonight's subject. So I think Jennifer is starting. So Jennifer, feel free to click on your talk button to turn your microphone on. Excellent, perfect. And you can start anytime you want.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Michelle. We are very excited to be here tonight. As Michelle mentioned, this is our first OTF webinar, and we are hoping that you enjoy it and get some practical ideas that you can use in your classroom.
I'm just jumping back in for a quick second. Erin, when Jennifer is speaking, it's better if you keep your microphone off and vice versa, because there's a little bit of an echo. So since you're in the same room, we can hear the feedback in the other microphone. That's great. Thanks so much. Okay.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so this is us, and these are our Twitter handles. So if you are on Twitter, please share during the webinar if you can, and use the hashtag OTFConnects and hashtag TrippingOverKindergarten. And if you'd like to share your handle in the chat box, it's always a great way for us to connect with each other. So we wanted to get an idea of who we have with us tonight. So if you are a kindergarten educator, if you can give us a green check mark, but if you are in a different role, special education or something like that, give us a red X. Okay, it looks like we have a lot of kindergarten educators with us. Thank you for posting that, Michelle. Wonderful. Lots of different things, I guess. So we hope that this information will help our kindergarten educators, but also those of you who are in a different role in the school. So we want our students to trip over math throughout our day within a variety of experiences, both inside and outside of the classroom. But we also want them to think about their learning, express, share, and represent their thinking. Our goals in teaching math, in order for us to know what our students are truly learning is to have our students think about their math and express, share, and represent their learning. So our ultimate goal is to have them love their learning and to find that learning throughout the classroom. I'm going to turn it over to Erin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. We want to integrate mathematical learning into our daily routine, such as our sign-in question and during transitions. We also want to use mathematical language and apply math across all our subject areas. For example, in the Block Building Center, we're going to talk about the width of basis support and how it relates to the stability of the structure. So we're bringing in that engineering piece into our Block Center. It's in this integration process that children are understanding that math is everywhere and that it has meaningful connections to their lives.
So starting in September of 2016, Ontario started dedicating more than $60 million to help support students achieve better results in mathematics. The renewed math strategy is an early years to grade 12 strategy that will benefit from and mobilize the latest research and lessons learned regarding effective math learning, teaching, and assessment. The strategy provides new forms of support to all schools, increased support to some schools with greater needs in math achievement, and intensive support to a select group of schools with the greatest needs in math achievement. Learning math results is more than a mastery of basic skills. It equips students with a concise and powerful means of communication. Mathematical language, structures, operations, and processes provide students with a framework and tools for reasoning, justifying conclusions, and expressing ideas clearly. Through mathematical activities that are practical and relevant to their lives, students develop mathematical understanding, problem-solving skills, and related technological skills that they can apply in their daily lives and eventually in the workplace. In early years in kindergarten, this will include a play-based model where educators identify and embed significant math learning through a range of experiences in order to support future learning.
So let's talk about the importance of math. You can see our equation on this slide here, that knowledgeable educators plus thoughtful provocations equal our young mathematicians. I'm going to read you a quote from the National Association for the Education of Young Children. The quote goes like this: "Mathematics helps children make sense of their physical and social worlds around them, and children are naturally inclined to use mathematics in this way. By capitalizing on such moments, and by carefully planning a variety of experiences with mathematical ideas in mind, teachers cultivate and extend children's mathematical sense and interest." So for us, what this means is, of course, knowing our students and planning experiences based on their interests and their skill levels. This allows us to help our students to trip over math every day in kindergarten. So Michelle's going to post a link to about a 5-minute video. This private video is from Doug Clements, an educator and researcher of early learning and math. And he's going to talk about the 5 ways that early mathematics is really surprising. So you're going to click on the link or cut and paste it into your browser. When you're back, give us a green check mark so that we know that everybody has had a chance to watch the video.
Okay, so I think that we have now quite a few participants back in the room, and yeah, I've received a lot of green check marks, so I hope that you guys enjoyed the video, and I'm going to pass the microphone back to Jennifer or to Erin to resume the presentation.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that video. It's quite cute the way his little story went at the end there. On our next slide here, we have got all 5 of his points. We just wondered if you could use the icon tool, which is the bottom landscape picture on the left-hand side of the slide, to make a point, to make an icon. Which point for you was the most surprising? Which of those 5 ways in Doug Clement's video that you found the most surprising? For me, it was that early exposure to math is the #1 predictor of school success. I think my first inclination definitely would have been literacy, so that was my surprising moment.
For those of you who are not on a computer, if you're on a tablet, you can just type in the chat box below #1, #2, #3, etc., whatever you think is the most appropriate. So all the participants on tablet, you can just type in the chat box. Thanks.
Yeah, so if quite a few people are agreeing with me, #3, the early math predicts later school success. That was your surprising moment. But also how deep and broad children's mathematics and learning can be. Children are always surprising us with what they know already in their math learning and in other areas in the classroom as well, of course.
Yeah, Nicole, basically what you need to do is go to the bottom tool on the vertical tool strip, and there you can select an icon, and then you can drag the icon on the slide. So you see the vertical tool strip to the left of the whiteboard, you go to the bottom icon, you select a symbol, and then you drop it. Perfect, exactly like that. Excellent.
No worries, Nicole. We are new to this too. All right, we're going to move to the next slide. So I have another question for you. I was wondering, for our kindergarten educators, do you use question of the day in your classroom? So if you can use the poll question, the polling, so give me a check mark if you use question of the day, or an X if you do not. Or if you are not able to access that, just put a yes or a no in the chat room. Oh, looks like we have building challenge of the day. Oh, Adeline, that sounds really cool. Okay, so a bit of a mix of both. So we do question of the day every day in our classroom, and this is a routine that allows the students to talk about math in a meaningful way. So students can explore all strands of math, and there are lots of connections that we can make between math and literacy. And we can connect them to an event in the school or something that's going outside in the school. We can introduce something new. We can make a connection to ongoing learning that's happening in the classroom. And we always try to have the students contribute to what we're doing. And my best advice is always to start simple. So we're going to show you some examples of what this would look like in our classroom. So on the left-hand side, you'll see pretty much a simple question of the day. We've used some popcorn words for the question, and it's a yes or no. And especially at the beginning of the year, I always put a check mark and an X, so that's easy for those children who are just beginning to read to be able to use the symbols for their knowledge of yes or no. On the right-hand side, you'll see one where the children have, the question is, what is 2 and 1? And they put the answer beside their name. That's a great idea, Julie. On the top of this square, this slide, you'll see the question was, I like to eat my potatoes, and we've used different pictures for the different kinds of potatoes they can eat. And then once the children answered it, during our time together, we used 10 frames, so an introduction of 10 frames to calculate how many have answered in each way. And then we did a little bit of addition to take that back to the 10 frame, and how do we know this is 10? Well, the first one, there's 2 missing, so 10 minus 2 is 8. So we're starting to do some simple basic math addition when we do it. And then on the bottom, there's a simple way for the kids to connect that 10 frame to how many kids are in the room today, and how can we add it up. Sometimes we will take the results from our question of the day and have the children help us put it together to create a graph. So in this particular case, the question was, I like sunny days, cloudy days, and some of them were in the middle. They couldn't decide whether they liked both one or the other. And so we graphed it. And you can see on the bottom right-hand corner of that pic collage that there are 3 columns, and the children helped us work together to graph that. Here's another example of the kids writing their numbers on the board. So there was not a question, it was just a statement, draw the number 3. And they had to put their name tag with it, so we knew who had drawn it. This gives us an opportunity to see who might need some help with writing their numbers, and the same thing can be done with letters. Now this is an activity where they had to put the numbers in sequence, and the same thing, we've done this with letters as well. So we would place the cards either on the table, or we have placed them around the room, so they had to go search for the numbers, which they really love. And then we had a string across the whiteboard, and the next slide will show you that string. And they had to go and place the numbers on the string and put them in order. So they had to work collaboratively to be able to put the name tags in order. And then there's a lot of discussion going on about whether that number goes there or where it goes, and the same thing with the letters. And you can see on the slide on the right, they had the number line there to use as a tool to help them go through the numbers if they wanted to check and see if they were right. This was a lot of fun. One day this year we did this, and actually the number 9 disappeared. So we were like all day long, the kids were looking for the number 9. Eventually it showed up. We're not really sure where it went or how it disappeared, but it was a great activity for the whole day. So, excuse me, it's really important for our children to have a connection to the math and to understand why it's necessary to have the knowledge. So when we can make this math meaningful to what's happening in their world, then they make that connection, and they're more likely to absorb it and remember it for another time. They gain that deeper understanding. So a couple other examples of how we made math a little bit more meaningful in our classroom. On the left-hand side, you'll see my teaching partner from last year was pregnant, and so we tracked Mrs. Eby's pregnancy, and the children were able to measure her belly on a weekly basis. We made lots of predictions and estimates about how big she was using string. And then each week she would, there's a wonderful app that tells you how big the baby is, and so she would tell them in comparison to real life objects, and we would make estimates with cubes about how big we thought the baby was, and they could actually see that in real time. On the right-hand side is a program that we did called Play 60. And so this was trying to get the kids moving. So every day we were tracking our steps, and they had to add those up, and we were trying to get so many steps a day. And so we had to figure out how many and what we were doing for each activity, and we kept running tally. And then we did 10,000 jumping jacks one time in a gym, in an assembly for it. This goes back to the taking surveys and graphs, kind of like the question of the day. So these friends made up their own surveys, and from those surveys, after asking their classmates, they created graphs. So the math was meaningful to them because it was something they wanted to know about, and they were able to give more information from the graph and share that information with their classmates and the educators in the classroom. Sometimes some individual inquiry questions come out, and this is one that came out from one of the little friends in my room, and he wanted to know how many days of spring there were. So he sat down with the educator and figured out for each month how many days of spring were in that month. They added it all together and figured out that there were 92 days of spring. And this was important to him. He was really interested in how many days of spring there were and tracking it. And yeah, it was really kind of cool. This little friend today, this year, he was just playing with the cubes one day, and he stacked them all on top of one another, and he said, "Mrs. Evans, look, I'm this many cubes tall." And I'm like, "How many cubes is that?" And so we figured out that if he took it apart, he could place them on the hundreds chart, and then he could figure out how many cubes tall he was by the numbers on the hundreds chart. And then he was able to take it one step further and do a little writing to go along with it. So learning centers, we know that our classroom is like our third teacher, and that it's important to have good learning centers and activities in the classroom that will enhance their learning opportunities and help the kids be creative and make their learning meaningful. So this quote is from our EDFO's Thinking It Through, Thinking Mathematically document. And it's just take an opportunity to read it. Talks about how important it is for us to think about the math that might occur at the centers when we're doing our planning for our programs. So it's also important for us as educators to realize that sometimes math happens even when we're not expecting it. So we will have children playing in a certain area, and they just will say something that will pull their math out. And so we always have to be aware and listening to what the students are saying. And my little friend on the left-hand side was just deciding she was going to pull out all the white ones, so she was sorting. But she was playing at the Dramatic Play Center, and these white cubes were going to be her milk for her coffee or to go along with her cookie. My friend on the right-hand side was just playing with the loose parts, and he made a pattern. On the left-hand side was a sorting activity, all the same colors. There was actually trays of different colors on the table, and they could make patterns with either the different colors, or they were able to sort the materials that are the same color. On the right-hand side is a 10-frame chart. So this was over a sensory bin or sand table, and there are different things at the top by the numbers. So they had to try and find the things in the sand. And the 10 frames kind of helped them to see at a glance that, okay, I have to have 2, I think those are washers, and they filled 2 boxes, then they knew that they had all the washers they needed to have. This little friend was building. He was built them up so tall, and our guideline in our classroom is that you don't build taller than you. So he was always checking to make sure, and he said to me, "Mrs. Evans, look at these blocks. I'm taller than these blocks." So again, we're always looking for that math and listening to hear it in our students and see how they're growing. Some examples of some geometry. So straws and connectors, a very common carpet toy. And so this little friend made a cube, and she was quite happy, as you can see, to share it and have her picture taken with it. And then taking that 3D figure geometry to our art table, where they can build 3D figures using plasticine and toothpicks. Excuse me. On the left-hand side, you'll see an iPad app. It's an app, a tool. It's called Osmo. And this is one of the, there are many sections of Osmo, but this is one that uses tangrams. So the idea is that it shows a picture on the screen, and the little red connector at the top of the iPad has a mirror on it. So the mirror shows, it kind of shows on the counter what the kids are putting, what order the kids are putting the tangrams in, and they have to try and match it to the picture. And once they match to the picture, it gets all flashy and blingy, and they get all excited because they put them in the right way. It's Osmo, O-S-M-O, just like it sounds. And there are a couple other ones. There's a number, excuse me, a number activity that you can put with it. There is also a coding one that I will share with you a little later on as well. The kids are always very excited to use the technology as a tool in the classroom. On the right-hand side, this is an example of the kids creating their own games. So the cups just have numbers on them, and these students were sitting down with the number cups, and they just created their own game. On the top left-hand side, these are some loose parts, magnet toys, and animals that we had taken outside. So an example of taking your learning outside. And the children created some cages or domains for the animals, and in this case they were creating them with the magnet toys, and they had a nice little cube going there too. On the bottom right is a light table activity. So an example of how you could extend their math learning onto the light table. And these activities for the light table, we were just created them with leftover pieces of laminating. So we have a big laminator at our school, and I always grab the remnants from when people do laminating. And you can just write on them with Sharpie markers, and you can create whatever you'd like. And you could use jewels. I think this is colored markers, but you could use jewels on this one as well.
So we're going to take a look at how loose parts can support mathematical learning. Loose parts are a collection of open-ended materials that can either be naturally found or commercially bought. And these loose parts are collections that allow for open-ended experiences so that children can show their learning in many ways. So let's take a look at how some loose parts collections can be used in your math program. So using loose parts should be very intentional in what you place out on the table or as a provocation for your students. You should be very intentional about how you present the materials as well. Are you going to be making a very direct implication of what you want the children to do, or is your experience going to be more open-ended and your assessment is based on what they can show you or how they're going to use those materials? But either way, that your intention, you've got your learning goals based on your curriculum for your students. It's also important for loose parts to allow some free play and open exploration. The children do need to show us their thinking. And it's like going back to that Doug Clement's point that some of the kids already know so many things about mathematics that we can discover in many ways. And loose parts are one of those ways that they really do show us what they already know in mathematics. And it can really surprise us. On our next slide here, we've got a tray on the left of some commercially bought pieces, from game pieces, and also some rocks that I painted and put some dots on there to practice some numeracy skills. And this was basically an open-ended exploration of what the children knew about numbers and about subitizing. Both of these collections, you could be mixing your naturally found items and your commercially bought materials too. The one on the right is part of a building up kit of loose parts collections. And this was put out intentionally in our classroom as a STEAM challenge to incorporate math and engineering skills. Our next slide here shows some geometry with some loose parts of some pipe cleaners, some popsicle sticks, some colored sticks to show how the children can construct two-dimensional shapes. There's also, you can see a book there as the additional provocation with those loose parts. So with your loose parts, you could ask a question, like we had a couple of first slides, 2 slides ago, but you could also use a book as your provocation to have children interested in what you're showing. The other picture on the right is one of our students using a geoboard kit, a loose parts kit put together. So the intention is to practice your fine motor skills while forming 2D shapes. So this is incorporating our STEAM learning, right? With our math, our 2D shapes, our art. This child actually created a picture with her 2D shape knowledge. And also to practice some oral language. What words does she know about the materials that she's using? Those are some things that we're watching for as well to make sure that we know what children are, what they know, and how we can assess their learning in mathematics.
Okay, so I have another question for you. Do you or have you ever used coding in your classroom? If you can use the green check mark if you have, and the red X if you have not. All right. Okay, so a few more that have not. It's nice to see that some people are a little bit familiar with it. Codable is a great app. I like that one in our classroom too. So coding is basically, in the simplest form, it's the telling of step-by-step directions to give somebody something to do, whether it be on technology or telling a person. So it's kind of like procedural writing. I have a little bit of a video for you to watch. It's a little bit about why we think we should integrate coding in our school systems. So it's about 5 minutes. So Michelle has posted the link in the chat box. If you could give us a check mark when you come back to us, that would be really great. So you might have to cut and paste the link into your browser in a new to get in a new tab. Okay, please remember to give us a green check mark when you are back. It looks like we have the majority of people back. I really like this video because it kind of gives us an overview of some famous people, so to speak, or people that are young and they have used coding to be quite successful in their life. The thing about where they show where the people work, I always think that we should show that to high school students, that maybe what get them excited about coding and computer science if they could work in that kind of atmosphere. So keep calm and just code it. Why should we code? There's a few different things that coding is beneficial for related to math. So it promotes computational thinking. And computational thinking is the thought processes involved in formulating a problem and expressing a solution in such a way that a computer, a human or a machine, can effectively carry it out. Development of design and problem skills. So it's important for educators to consider the importance of problem solving in all contexts, not only in the context of math, so that children will develop the habit of applying creative, analytical, and critical thinking skills in all aspects of their life. So even when they're coding, they are designing and they are problem solving through the code. Coding is a type of storytelling. There is a beginning, a progression, and an ending. So it's the beginning of that, getting those skills to do that story retell. And it supports development of early childhood numeracy and literacy. So there's lots of counting, there's geometry, lots of spatial awareness, directionality, And there's lots of oral language that goes in as they're talking to their classmates and explaining what the code is. Unplugged coding is the art of telling a computer how to perform tasks. So coding is the art of telling a computer how to perform tasks. Unplugged coding is just presenting these ideas before you're doing it online. So it gives students a physical experience that they can relate back to when they're working online. So some examples of how we make this happen in our classroom. This is one of the carpets in our classroom. So we use painter's tape and created a grid. The blocks that you see are like roadblocks. So they were actually coding their friends. They had a beginning and an end, and they used the arrows and the cards that you can see on the right-hand side to create a code to tell their friends how to get from the start of the carpet area where they decided was to start to the finish. Game boards are another way that these students can begin to code before they get online. So you can see we have little game boards that have different shapes on them. They're using little Lego Man, or we have little aliens. And Lego Man, I don't know about your classroom, but Lego Man are a hit in my classroom. They all want to use the Lego Man. So it's a good buy-in for them. And they're using the arrows to give directions to get from one area to the other. On the left-hand side, you can see that there are 2 X's on that maze, and so the X's are like roadblocks. And the code function that is there is telling the little guy that he has to jump over those over those roadblocks. And that jump symbol plus the arrows are symbols that they will use in other coding tools online. This is one that we did with straws and connectors. So simple carpet tool. And they actually did it with their bodies, but you could use it with a stuffed animal or any kind of tool that they had in the classroom. And so the child on the left is giving directions and coding for his friend to get through the maze. I'm sorry, Nicole, just ask the questions before I just want to answer Nicole's question. She asked, how do they say which way to go using the arrows? So because left and right is not really something that kindergarten children are usually aware of, they just kind of turn the arrow to make it go the way. So they just use a straight arrow and then they turn it to the way that they want the children or their friend to move. So as they're coding, young children are learning how to create and express themselves creatively within the computer. And it's a good way for us to get them to start using technology as a tool and not a toy. We know that at home it's mostly being used as a toy. And so at school we want them to use it as a tool and see it as a way that they can create things. So this is the coding app on Osmo. So on the app, there is it's like a maze. So the little guy that you can kind of see on the right-hand side, he looks like a blob. He really looks like a blob. I'm not sure what kind of animal he's supposed to be. But he's moving through this maze to collect strawberries that give him power, and he's looking for animals. So the children have to put the coding functions on the bottom, and this is basic block coding. And they push the arrow on the green block, and that makes him move. And so they can move through it. Well, that surprised me. We have lots of iPads in our schools, Christiane. I don't know what we would do without them, actually. It's a major tool for our school. Codable is another one. So you can see at the top the arrows. They have to drag and drop the arrows to give directions for the fuzzball to move through the maze to collect all the coins. And as they go along, it gets a little bit more challenging. And Codable.com has lesson plans and that help teachers start and finish. And you can set your class up online so that each child has their own account. The Osmo is something that our school purchased for my principal purchased for our kindergarten department. If you go to the Osmo website, and I think Michelle posted it a little bit, just a little bit ago, they have all the pieces on there. And I did notice recently that they are starting to put packages together for educators. And I saw somebody mention Scratch Junior a little while ago. Scratch Junior is another app that is great for interactive storytelling. So the students can pick an animal, and they are giving it directions and making it do things. They can change the background, and so they're creating a story using the coding directions on the app. And this is Lightbot. So this is the kind of the squiggly line that you saw my friend using in the unplug coding comes from this. So this is a jump symbol. It looks like a coil. And the object of this one is for them to get the Martian onto the blue square. And this one was created through the Hour of Code. I have another poll for you. Switching to outdoor learning. So how often do you have outdoor learning? Michelle, is there a, he switched it, he's good. So if you go to the, where you had the check marks, you can either put an icon on, or you can check on the A, B, C, or D right beside the hand. You can do a check mark, or you can put it in the chat box.
Yes, there are a number of tools that are available to you, and I see that you are all that you're using them all. But you can use the little poll tool, the little drop box, or you can just drag an icon on the screen or type in the chat box below.
Great. It looks like a lot of people are going out every day, which is awesome. So the next few slides will give you some ideas of things that you can do that relate to math outside. And this is just a quote that we got from an article called The Outdoor Mathematician. So it just says all the mathematical learning children do indoors, they can also do outside, but with vigor and freedom and scale. So we know that we have more space and bigger things that we can use outside, and they can run and jump and sometimes do some physical activity that they can't always do in the classroom. These are some geometry. So these cubes and different shapes, we froze water, colored water, in Tupperware containers. And just pulled them out, and they were able to look at the different shapes, and it's a good, because they could put their hands on them physically, and then they could extend that into some STEAM learning for doing some structures in science and a little bit of engineering. Pushback from parents going out in rainy or cold weather. Not a huge amount at my school. Yeah, it's a thing. Erin said it's a process. You just have to kind of train your kids as much as you train the parents. Oh no, Michelle, did you see that? Era, Melanie. Some people have blank slides.
And I don't know why. I don't know what's happening here. I guess you may have to log out and log back in. I don't know what it is. Let me see if I move back and forward. Does that work? Okay. Okay, it's probably a small interruption in the internet connection. That's probably what's happening, you know. But I can see the slide. I think most people can see them. So hopefully you are back online. Yeah. Okay. If you can't, really, the only option is to log out and log back in, and I will also provide you with a support number if you want to call or support team. But I honestly don't know what the problem may be. It's probably on your end, and I don't know how to help you. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, here's some more loose parts that we just take outside to create and make pictures with the pattern blocks, and some sticks on the left-hand side that my partner just whittled the bottom of them a little bit and did some paint. So simple tools that you can find outside and create a math activity. And this is just using the materials you already have. So a lot of us have hopscotch. On the left-hand side, you'll see that we added some sight words to them so they can, you know, throw their rock on there. And there's a combination of math and counting to move on to the squares. And then on the right-hand side, these children just created their own game with sidewalk chalk. The top picture is showing a box that has, it's like a tablecloth, and each square has a number in them. And so the idea was that they had to either collect items from around them, or there's some loose parts in the baskets on the mat, and they had to put the right number in each of the squares. And on the bottom, this is a game that I grew up with, my dad grew up with, and it's called Shut the Box. So this is an outside version of Shut the Box. So that you roll the die and you have to cover the numbers, and the idea is to try and cover all the numbers. So if you roll a 3, you want to cover the 3, or you can cover the 2 and the 1. Nicole, my board came actually from my niece and nephew's house. After, usually in the spring, they have lots of wood that they're cutting down and cleaning up. But there are lots of resources and places, even if you post it somewhere sometimes on Facebook, or you look in kindergarten Facebook groups, sometimes they will have people that advertise in there that they have wood. And here's another example of just using the tools that you have outside. So on the left-hand side, the kids, you can counting by tens here. And I think at the very back, you can see there's one there. They're counting by ones. And then using plates and rolling the dice like an outdoor game. Some capacity. So just taking the water table outside, pots and pans in the wintertime, or even in the summertime with the sand. And on the top, these children were just stacking to see how high they could make it and which one was higher, and how is it as tall as me, or is it as tall as you? And on the bottom, there's some measurement activities. So they were doing some measurement in the classroom, and they decided to take that outside and see how many of the black tiles would equal the meter stick, and then taking that around the playground to see how many, what was bigger and what was smaller. And again, same thing here, measuring. So outside they were measuring who's bigger, who's taller, comparing themselves to each other. And in this one, they were using the popsicle stick and walking around outside to see what is bigger, what is smaller. Thanks for that, Nancy. I think I have heard of the Creative Zone. Well, they can get lots of different things. I actually have a parent who works in a restaurant, and they bring me bags and bags of corks. It's wonderful. Here's some patterning. On the left-hand side, my friend just discovered that her name was actually a pattern. So if she wrote it over and over and over again, it was a pattern. And on the right-hand side, our friends are using found materials or loose parts outside to create patterns. And this is back to the Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the other. So just simple putting some things down and seeing if they can figure out which one doesn't belong. Whether it be because it's a different kind of vehicle, or whether it be a different shape, or whether it be the color, and seeing if they can recognize that these things don't belong. I'm going to pass things over to Erin.
Sorry about that. Am I on right now? That's wonderful. All right, so we're going to talk about some large group math activities that we can do in our classroom. So large group experiences help to create a math-rich community of learners. It's where children have the opportunity to learn from one another and to gain confidence. On this slide, you see 2 books that we've used in our classrooms, Number Sense Routines and Number Talks. So those are 2 things that we'll talk about in the next couple of slides. The first one is Number Talks. Number Talks encourage students to make sense of mathematics, be able to communicate mathematically, and reason and prove solutions. And we've got a short video to show you, and this is a video of Jen doing a number talk in her classroom. So the video is only a couple minutes long, so just give us a check when you've watched that and you're back to us.
Thanks, Adeline. I had forgotten to put back the poll to green check mark, but yeah, now it's back on.
Yes, Nancy, this is a way to practice hypnotizing. All right, it looks like most people have seen the video. So yeah, Number Talks is about practicing supertizing. We know that supertizing, that quick mental math, is very important for children to know, to learn and to get into practice. It helps all other aspects of math learning if they can do that mental computation really quick in their early years. All right, so we're going to move on to some of the slides. These are some slides of my classroom this year. And for me, from Number Talks, I tried to make Number Talks more meaningful this year. I noticed that in some of my outdoor learning pictures, materials and toys ended up grouped together. So I showed my class these pictures, like this one with the vehicles at the bottom, and I asked them, how many vehicles do you see? So just like Jen was showing in her video, what do you see and how do you see them? Those children explained their ways of how they saw them. Some, saw the group of 3, some saw 2 groups, a group of yellow, a group of red, and the answer being 4. So then I had a few kids take the vehicles. I brought the vehicles actually into our classroom. So this picture shows outdoor learning. So I brought the vehicles into our classroom and arranged them in different ways, showing the number 4. So any other children, so they're learning from each other, right? It's that collaborative learning piece where they can rearrange the vehicles and how they see it, to show that different combinations of position, color, etc. can make up the number 4, that quick computational supertizing math. So the Number Talk was meaningful to them because it was personal to them, and also they were able to learn from one another as I extended that to a hands-on experience. Our top picture, you can see, of course, the smiley faces for privacy, but you can see my 4 little guys, 3 of them ducking down, 1 standing up. I just happened to get that shot as I was taking some documentation pictures of them playing a game. So it was a great way, I thought, of them really seeing how you can make 4 really quickly, the 3 and 1 to make 4. And also the picture on the right using our loose parts. I noticed that the student had grouped some animals together, and I thought that was a really good way for them to really hone in on seeing groups of items stuck together. And it's so meaningful to them because these are the toys that they've been playing with, loose parts that they've been playing with on a daily basis. Moving on to Math Talks. So Math Talks is a philosophy built around the concept of being able to explain thinking and to understand other ways that your peers are solving problems. It's also a way to build upon one another's thinking. And for me, I do a math talk. Usually it's centered around the sign-in question. So I'll do it, we'll have a question of the day, and then we'll sit in a circle. And often I'll bring out, like you see in this picture, a collection of our loose parts. So everybody's sitting in a circle. I like to use those loose parts because I really believe in the hands-on manipulatives really help children really get a good concept, a good grasp of what they're learning. So everyone gets a voice to share their thinking by doing the turn and talk. The other thing I try to get them to do is to use a real mathematical language. So instead of I put it there to make a set of 4 or set of 5, I will reiterate what they're saying. I'll restate what they're saying to be like, I added 1 more rock to the pile to make 4. So we're really encouraging to use that proper language. And as they're developing their oral language skills, and as they go further on in their math learning, you really need to know those proper terminology for them to really grasp the concepts. All right, moving on to Count Around the Circle. So Count Around the Circle comes from the book Number Sense Routines by Jessica Shumay. And the way I do this routine is you choose a counting sequence. So say, for example, we're going to start practicing counting forwards by ones. This would be something we might do at the beginning of the year. And we stand in a circle facing each other, and each student, we go around the circle, and each student says a number in the sequence. At the beginning of the year, though, we might do some choral counting, which means that we're all counting together. I might walk around on the inside of the circle and point to each child, and we each say the number in the counting sequence. So, of course, we can make this harder and different ways of learning, including that active learning and kinesthetic learning, and to make it fun and to get the kids really involved using their bodies to help learn. And we can also make it harder by maybe counting by twos or counting backwards. Some ways that we make it fun is if we count to 10, the 10th person gives the person beside them or gives myself a high five. So I try to make our Count Around the Circle routine relevant to what is going on in our classroom. For example, if somebody's away on vacation, I might ask them, how many would we have if Leah was here? So we've counted around the circle, and we've gotten to a certain number. So now we're making it harder by extending their learning, asking what would happen if our whole entire class was there. So with this routine, we are practicing counting patterns and sequences, estimation, problem solving, counting on, and cardinality. Lots of different math concepts that we can do in this routine. The next routine is called Count the Kids, and this is a number sense routine that I made up. So I really believe strongly in the connection between brain and body, and that children learn best this way. So I wanted to bring that idea to learning math concepts in a fun way, an engaging way in our classroom. This is how I do the routine. The kids sit in a horseshoe shape at the carpet, and depending on the concept I'm teaching, I'll have a number of students stand up at the opening of the horseshoe. For example, when practicing order irrelevance, which is understanding that the order in which the objects are counted is irrelevant, I'll have 5 kids come to stand up in that opening of the horseshoe shape. We'll count the kids, starting at one end, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll count the kids again, starting at the other end, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I might mix up the kids, and we'll count again. So after each time I'm moving the kids around, or we're starting to count in a different order, I'll ask the kids, how many people do we have standing up here? And also, if we start counting from a certain other person, how many people will I end up counting? So again, it's sort of like our counting around the circle, but also counting the kids. We're trying to address all these different mathematical concepts in a fun way and in ways that is meaningful to our classroom and what's going on in the classroom. Let's go on to other ways that we can incorporate math, right? We want our kids to trip over math in everything we do during the day, not just during our large and small groups, direct teaching times, but also in those moments where we have a few moments to learn, and we might as well add those mathematical concepts in there. So our first one we're going to talk about here is gym, or DPA. So here you see a list of some of the games that we play in my classroom, whether outside, in the gym, or in the classroom. And being physically active is good for the body and the brain. Like I said, that's a really good focus, really strong focus that I have in my classroom, is I really believe in that connection, that mind-body connection. In this way, I believe that children are more interested and more engaged in what they're learning if they're actually physically involved. Being physically active in your learning, actually, research has shown that it improves their memories, increases attention span, improves their children's ability to remember sequences, also forms a positive outlook and attitude towards their learning. So using any time of the day to practice math. Those few minutes you have during transitions, whether they're waiting for mom and dad to pick them up, they're lining up to go down to the gym, or what have you, to go outside. You can always use any extra time during the day to trip over those math concepts. If we're waiting for mom or dad, we might say, Leah left first, Dylan left second, so who was third? So we're practicing different math concepts in a really fun way. It's really casual. The kids, you're tricking them, I guess. Essentially, they don't even know that they're learning. But in a meaningful way, right? You want your kids to know, to make those connections into their lives. All right, we're going to move on back over to Jen to talk about some small groups and some math centers.
I've seen a couple of people have said that they have too many kids to create a horseshoe or too many to make a circle on the carpet. So maybe this will help you a little bit. We do some small group or math center learning in our classroom. With this math center, what we'll do is we will actually have a math center dedicated time. So the kids are divided into small groups of 3-4 students, and there are that many activities. So in my class, we have 8 groups, so there are 8 activities in the classroom. And of the 8 activities, 2 of the activities have them working specifically with a teacher, teaching them either a new skill or teaching them a new game. And the other activities are ones that they can work on independently. So in this case, the group on the left-hand side is playing magnetic dominoes. Well, initially, they would have been working with an educator to teach them how to play the game and talk about the numbers and what it looks like and what it means. Whereas the group on the right-hand side would be working on their own. It's definitely an activity that they can do independently, although, as you can see, not so neatly. This group here on the left-hand side is playing a game called Fill the Cup. So they roll the dice, and they have to take that many cubes and put them in their cup, and the winner is the person who fills the cup to the top. And on the right-hand side, this was a dice activity that I taught the kids. So all it was we had 10 gems in the middle of the table. They had to roll the dice, and whoever had the highest number got the jewel, and we just played to 10 jewels. So there's a couple of things happening with this one. There's supervising, looking at the dice to see what the numbers are automatically. There's counting on. There's some addition. And we're teaching them the skill about how to roll the dice. We talked about how we can roll the dice without it going all over the table. A couple of questions: how long do students work in their math groups? So initially, we only work for like 5 minutes. So we do 5 minutes, and we might do 1, maybe 2 rotations. So we're only doing this for 10, at the most 15 minutes. Sometimes it's only 5 minutes. There are assigned groups, and everybody gets to rotate through the different groups. And we may do this 2 or 3 times a week. It just depends on how much is going on. It's actually not a lot of setup. The activities are activities that can go out on the tables fairly quickly. Small pieces of, yes, a lot quieter and good for aiming. If you use, you can use felt or small pieces of material to roll the dice on. So here's a question for you. Can kindergarten students do place value? Quick little poll. Green check mark for yes, red X for no. Lots of yeses coming through. It's good to see. Doug Clements talked about having the kids surprise us in what they can do, and I really believe that it's okay for us to challenge them and to try and take them a little bit beyond what we might think they can do. So here are a few of my friends this year, and yes, this is a very guided activity, but we talked a little bit about place value, and we worked with 3-digit numbers and some base 10 blocks. So it's introducing a new tool to them. We talked about the ones, and then how we make a 10 block, and then how many would be in a 100 block, and then we put it together by creating the numbers using the base 10 blocks. I'm going to pass it back over to Erin.
All right, moving on to picture books and using picture books to teach large group or small group lessons. In my classroom, we do both, large group or small group. It's a fun way of introducing a new topic or to practice or to talk about a mathematical concept that we're currently learning about. It also helps to teach the precise language to explain their thinking and to make personal connections. Let's go on to some examples. Pete the cat and 4 groovy buttons. Well, probably most of us have heard Pete the cat He's got a very catchy tune. It's a very repetitive story. It's very visually appealing. It's funny. There's a life lesson involved. So lots of different learning can take place. Social emotional regulation, all that kind of stuff can also come out of your Pete the Cat. This is a book you could use in many aspects of your learning in the classroom. What I like to do with the books I use with the kids is I like to extend the story. So in this picture, you see that I've extended the story to a tabletop game. We're rolling a dice. We're counting the buttons on the children's clothing. So the kids use buttons to add to their colored shirts. They can add when they're rolling the dice. They can subtract when they're rolling the dice. It's just a fun way for them to make that connection between what they've just been hooked on with the book and to help cement their learning, either subtraction or addition. 10 Little Caterpillars. This is a book that my partner and I read both inside the classroom, and then we took it to outdoor learning. So using picture books for large group lessons are really a great way for introducing the new concept or for activating prior knowledge. And that's what we have done in this case for 10 Little Caterpillars. We've been talking about 10 frames. So using 10 Little Caterpillars during our outdoor learning, we felt was a great way for activating their knowledge and for practicing their knowledge in that way. And like I said, they're moving their bodies, so they're all engaged. They all want to be chosen to represent counters inside those hula hoops. It was, and as well, this was so relevant to the children because at the time that they were into an inquiry into bugs, into spring and gardens. So it allowed us to practice our mathematical concept, but also allowed us to bank upon their inquiry and their interest in the classroom. So it was very meaningful and very relevant to them. The Hat and the Mitten are two examples of books that I've used in small group lessons. So when we've done a story retell with the mitten, for example, this is in my empty water table, and I've used some loose parts, some pieces of log to represent the setting of the mitten. I've used stones. I made them into story stones using Mod Podge, put on some flat rocks. So in this way, the children can come to the center and they go through the story either by themselves or with their friends, and they reenact the story of these animals fitting inside the mitten. So different concepts we are practicing in this way, of course, not only the literacy part of the story retell, but the capacity part, fitting each animal into the mitten, what might happen to the mitten as each animal is added, and some estimation. How many animals do you think the mitten might hold? So what did we do with the hoop? So with the 10 Little Caterpillars, it's just a base. The 10 Little Caterpillars are counting as the story goes on. We're adding up. We're going from 1 to 10. So as we're reading the story, the children are going into the hoops and showing as a 10 frame representation of counting up to 10. So let's move on to 5 Green and Speckled Frogs. 2 picture books. These are the provocation at centers. The kids were already familiar with the books, so these were just put in the book nooks, and the children had the opportunity to reread these books together, practicing with some manipulatives and some story pieces in order to practice their mathematical concepts. And it's more of a co-constructing their own learning, right? They're working with some partners and some small groups, and so they're really learning from one another, and they're very confident in their learning. All right, we are running out of time, so we're going to go through a couple questions for deeper learning. And of course, we're basing our mathematical lessons on assessment on our curriculum. So I can give you a minute or a few seconds here to kind of breeze through this quote. But essentially what we want to do is our questions are meant to challenge, extend, and scaffold our children's learning. So we're always got to remember that the process and the conceptual understanding, not the correct answer, is what we're really listening for when we're asking questions. My personal favorite question to ask children in any circumstance is, if I wanted to do this, what would I need to do? It really gets them thinking about the process. All right. So because we are running out of time, one of our links that will be sent to you tomorrow is an article from Edutopia. It's called 5 Powerful Questions Teachers Can Ask Students. And you'll get that link in your email tomorrow. Basically, the 5 questions are: what do you think? Why do you think that? How do you know this? Can you tell me more? And what questions do you still have? And we really feel that those 5 questions are very powerful. And even if you just stuck with those 5 questions in all aspects of your learning in the classroom, you can really understand a lot of children's learning. So we can quickly show those here. What do you think? Why do you think that? How do you know this? Can you tell me more? And what questions do you still have? This last one especially is a good question for it interrupts us from telling the children too much. It gives us that chance to pause and let them really reflect on what they need to find out more. All right. So Michelle, do we have any more time here, or do we need to wrap up our presentation at this time?
No, it's okay. Take another 5 minutes. You know, we are still 5 to 9, so take another 5 minutes, and then after that I'll do my conclusion.
All right.
All right, so we don't have time to show this video, but if you get a chance, Michelle's going to post a link tomorrow with all the other resources. This is a video from Dr. Kathy Bruce, and she's talking a little bit about implications in early math, and one of her big questions that she asks is, or she talks about, is about, do you think it's about talking about having the wrong answers? So my question for you is, do you think that in kindergarten it is valuable for us to talk to the kids about having the wrong answers and to correct them when it comes to some math materials? So if you can use the green check mark, red X, as we've been doing through the evening, just give me an idea of what you think. Definitely, Jen says, I have to agree. And it looks like most of our colleagues agree with you too. I think it's really important for the kids to know that it's okay to be wrong. And in my classroom, we actually use the acronym of FAIL. We call it First Attempt in Learning. And then letting them know that it's okay for them to have the wrong answer and for us to work through it and figure out how do we get to the right answer. And that's how we learn as we go through. Yes, growth mindset. And actually, that is all that we have for you tonight. So we want to thank you very much for taking the time to come to spend with us in this webinar and for all your great feedback and participation. Our emails are there. We're happy to answer any questions you have now, or if you have any questions, you're welcome to send us an email. I think Michelle has something for you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks, Erin. Thanks so much. I'm going to go over a few things, and then after that, if there are more questions, we can always do them once the recording is ended. I just want to congratulate you on completing your first OTF Connect session. I know how challenging it can be to talk without getting any visual feedback. It was really hard for me as well when I started working for OTF Connect, but you got the swing of it pretty quickly, I must say. And I think that, Jennifer, you were a little bit under the weather, I think, as well, so that didn't help. But I certainly look forward to working with you next season. I must confess that OTF Connect sessions for kindergarten teachers are always my favorite. It definitely takes very special qualities to be a kindergarten teacher. And once again, it showed through the session. You guys were all absolutely fantastic. I love to see all the smiley faces throughout the evening. I certainly want to thank all of you for sharing your ideas and suggestions along the entire session. It was interesting to me to see that iPads and hardwood floors were in such high demand, which I couldn't believe for hardwood floors, but I guess it makes all sense. A few more things. It's going to take me just a couple of more seconds. We have a few last sessions before we break for the summer. On May 1st, we have our very first French session of the year. It's presented by Susan Forrester and Jeanne Rochon. As you know, we only have a handful of French sessions each season. Due to the fairly small French population in Ontario, we also have few registrations so far for that session. Therefore, if you know French teachers, please forward them the invitation. That would be wonderful and greatly appreciated. It's next week, May 1st. On May 2nd, Teaching by the Seat of Your Pants, Joe Grabowski will show us how to use tools such as Skype and Google Earth to bring the world in your classroom. So that's probably a very interesting session as well. And then on May 3rd, we have an interesting session, but unfortunately sold out, but we'll try to reschedule that session for next season. And I'm going to paste into the chat box the links to our calendar and resource page if you want to explore yourself what's coming in the last in the last few days of the season. I also would like to tell you about another opportunity provided by OTF and the Ministry of Education. If you're a qualified teacher and completed an additional qualification course in math, technology, or kindergarten, you may be eligible for $450 subsidy. Here's the link to an OTF page with all the information for you to apply for that $450 subsidy. As you know, we really value your feedback. It's extremely important to us. So when quitting Blackboard, you will be redirected to a feedback survey on tonight's session, and you will be invited to fill that short online questionnaire. The survey only takes a few minutes. If you could do it right after the session, it would be greatly appreciated. And upon completing the feedback questionnaire, you will be redirected to another page allowing you to enter your name, and you will then receive a certificate of participation to this training session that you will be able to add to your professional learning resume. And if you don't have the time to complete the survey right now, or if you missed anything tonight, don't worry, we will send you in the next 24 hours, we'll send you a follow-up email with the link to this recorded session, to the feedback survey, and all the archived presentation. In the meantime, I'm going to provide you with these two links to the feedback questionnaire and to the feedback survey in case you are not redirected automatically. And I also would like to provide you with the link to the resource page for Jennifer and Erin's presentation tonight. It will be live by tomorrow morning. So here is that link for that resource page. So that's it. We have made it up to the end of the evening. Before wishing you a good evening, I would like to invite you to follow OTF on social media as well as on our OTF website. I will now end the recording of the session. Please feel free to remain online if you wish to ask Jennifer and Erin additional questions once the recording has ended. And otherwise, I wish you all a very, very good evening. Thank you once again for your participation in tonight's session. Bonne fin de soirée à tous et à toutes, et nous espérons vous revoir très bientôt sur OTF Connect. J'espère lundi soir pour la session en français. Voilà, donc merci beaucoup. Au revoir.